What's up, everyone, and welcome into another episode of Wizards Latest. I'm your host and DC sports fan, Ben Robertson, and on this page, we break down all the biggest headlines surrounding the Washington Wizards. So today, I want to talk about a couple of post-draft roster moves the Wizards made over the weekend. I want to revisit that Trey Johnson selection with the number 6 overall pick, why it seems even more exciting now a few days later. I want to revisit that CJ McCollum for Jordan Poole trade, at least the headliners of that deal. Again, now a few days later, now that a lot of the Wizards community has sort of gotten their reactions there, I want to give you a little bit of my review in further detail. And lastly, we'll talk about which veterans may or may not be on the move as this offseason progresses. So remember, drop your comments down below with any thoughts you may have on the video. Like and subscribe as well to Wizards Latest. I appreciate all of the support, you guys. Let's keep it rolling. Remember, you can also hit me over on Twitter at Ben Robertson32 with any future video ideas or, again, thoughts on the video you see. So let's jump right in today. Over the weekend, Kadari Richmond was added to this Wizards roster on a two-way deal. An undrafted free agent picked up a day after the draft, and Richmond is a guy that comes from St. John's, spent his 5th year there on that resurgent Rick Pitino team. Again, another player maybe a little bit older that you might expect for Will Dawkins to add in this rookie class. But again, spent his 5th year at St. John's, 3 years before that at Seton Hall, spent the freshman year at Syracuse, so bounced around just a little bit. And the book on Richmond is a really good defender, really good passer in his 5th year at St. John's. Averaged more than 6 rebounds a game as well to go along with 12.5 points, 5 assists. Not a great shooter, and that's probably why he fell out of this year's draft. Only shot at about 17% from beyond the arc in his final college year on just over an attempt per game. It kind of seemed like Pitino really just shut it down and said, hey, we're not going to chuck long balls. We're going to focus on what you do best, and maybe deep three-point shooting isn't that, and it's not really, what that St. John's team kind of built themselves on anyway. I actually got to see Richmond play once live in person. I happened to be up in New York. Got to see the Hoyas happened to be up in New York the same time I was there. I figured, hey, I'll check out the Georgetown Hoyas, check out Madison Square Garden, catch a game, hope maybe Georgetown can keep things close. They did. I believe they were leading by about 10 at halftime, and then R.J. Lewis and co. really got going in the second half and took over and ended up winning that Big East matchup. But again, that was, I checked the box score again. I had to make sure, but he finished with 10 points, 8 assists in that game, 5 of 12 from the floor, only took 1 three-point attempt and missed it. So in the game I saw him live in person, really kind of fit the script on him. And I will say, as a guy that's, already spent 5 years in college, all the time, you talk about can people develop shooting once they get to the league or not. And, when you only shoot at 17% your last year in college, and clearly it wasn't a priority, on your team for you to be a long ball shooter, you wonder if maybe that skill is ever going to grow in the NBA. But again, Will Dawkins saying, hey, I don't care if about position necessarily. Defense is a priority, and adding another young possible future talent to this roster. A little bit older of a player, 32-year-old Anthony Gill. He spent the last few years since 2020 with the team now, was released over the weekend. Just want to, tip the cap to Gill, thank him for his services. A player obviously never put up huge stats here in DC, but if you talk to anybody around the team, whether it's media members, front office, other players, everybody just has great things to say about Anthony Gill, a guy that a lot of people were familiar with here in DC from his time at UVA in college. Wouldn't be surprised maybe if there's a roster spot that comes available down the line that needs to be filled, and Anthony is still available and hasn't been picked up by anybody. Wouldn't be surprised if he's brought back to the organization. And last quick move I want to cover here from the weekend, Washington traded Colby Jones to OKC, reigning NBA champs now, for Dillon Jones and a second-round pick. So you add another second-rounder to the stockpile and add now a fifth first-round pick from last year's class to the roster. Of course, Dillon Jones and A.J. Johnson now traded for to go along with Sarr, Carrington, and George, who were all selected by the Wizards in the first round of last year's draft. Dillon Jones didn't do a ton with OKC last year. Obviously an incredibly talented team, but again, just adds another young player to the team that, you know, maybe he can find his footing and maybe turn into something here in DC. Obviously, we're looking, and as I've talked about, this is a year where we're trying to find out what these young players and what these young pieces can be at the NBA level. So let's talk again about Trey Johnson. Obviously, chatted about him a whole bunch following the draft last week, but I was a little bit excited about Ace Bailey, of course, and all the reports that he could fall to number 6 before the draft. I was fired up about it. I was honed in on him, and I still think he can be a really good NBA player. I think just his physical tools make him a great prospect. But after this weekend and everything with, you know, will he, won't he report to Utah, that whole situation, Ace kind of downplayed it in his opening press conference with them. But it just makes you really go, man, I'm glad we got the guy we did at number 6 in Trey Johnson, when all you've seen from him since getting selected is pretty much just how much basketball means to him, how much, you know, being great at this sport is an important thing in his life. Twitter videos of him just knocking down three-pointer after three-pointer, nothing but net, splash, splash, splash. It's just, wow, okay, cool. Like, we're pretty excited that this is the guy we got. And it makes you wonder, you know, how was he available with that number 6 overall pick? I mean, you know, we've talked about the accolades, SEC Freshman of the Year, led the conference in scoring in his lone year at Texas. You go, you know, how was he, you know, how was he not rated higher maybe even in this draft? And he fizzled out a little bit at the end of the season, particularly his efficiency. Maybe one reason, he was just cooking really in the heart of SEC play, highlighted by, you know, a 39-point performance against John Calipari's now Arkansas team. He had 32 points and a win against Kentucky. He was a little inefficient in that Kentucky game, but he got to the line a whole bunch. It was kind of a gritty performance and a big win for that Texas team. And then you look at the teams in front of us and you go, well, when you think about Philly there with that 3rd overall pick and them taking VJ Edgecombe, Trey's a guy that he's gonna need shots, like, to be quite honest. He's gonna be a focal point in the offense. For him to be successful in the NBA, I know he's talked about adding other tools, his defense, his playmaking, but his scoring is what we, you know, think about and what's gonna separate him and elevate him to stardom. And maybe a team like Philly is just not quite, you know, looking for somebody that's going to be that big of a focal point in their offense with some of the pieces that they already have. So again, just so fired up about Trey Johnson. Everything we've heard from him, kind of just heard about him and seen from him in the days that have followed the NBA draft. So I want to revisit the Jordan Poole, C.J. McCollum trade. Those were the two headliners of that deal. The full trade, Jordan Poole and Saddiq Bey, sent from Washington, along with the 40th overall pick in this year's draft, to New Orleans for C.J. McCollum, Kelly Olynyk, and a future second-rounder. I've seen a little bit more negativity about this deal than I thought I would. I was excited. Obviously, I was expecting, I should say, maybe to get more than, you know, a first-round pick at all back for Jordan Poole, particularly after what we saw Desmond Bane command in trade value and 4 first-round picks in return from him from Orlando to Memphis. I was pretty surprised when we didn't see a single first-round pick attached to Poole in that deal. But I have to wonder, you know, it's not like Will Dawkins wasn't trying to get a first-round pick, and I have to imagine maybe he just couldn't find the right deal, couldn't find that value back in return, and said, hey, I'll kind of maybe, you know, flip a little bit and get another win, and that is by trading for C.J. McCollum, who obviously still comes with a $30+ million price tag this year, but his contract expires after this season, and Poole's deal extends until next. He has 2 years left on his contract. And so now with McCollum, you have, some options for yourself. Again, I have to imagine didn't get the return value he wanted for Poole. So let's maybe try again with CJ McCollum. And if he has a really good start to his season, again, he was still a 20+ point per game scorer last year. Maybe we can get some value back for him. And if not, if we can't get off him, well, his contract expires at the end of the year. I've talked about the McCollum, Middleton, and Smart contracts all add up to be about $80 million, a little bit more. And getting off those deals, them all expiring, is going to be huge and put the Wizards just in a place of, extreme cap flexibility next year, with potentially around $100 million in cap space being available. So I think it was a smart move in that regard, because it just kind of frees yourself up, gives you some flexibility with CJ McCollum that you didn't have with Jordan Poole. So my last point here today, and with McCollum and with Middleton and with Smart, all very well-respected players around the NBA. CJ McCollum is the, Players Association president. They've all played, obviously, winning basketball in their careers. And while I have to imagine, a couple of those guys might want to get back onto contending teams, you don't expect those are the type of guys that are going to mope around. They're still going to lead these young players and help them along in their development. And I think that's something this front office is going to have to balance as they maybe try to field offers, whether it's for maybe McCollum, who has a good, start to his season. Maybe Chris Middleton gets something going here a little bit. We know Marcus Smart has sort of been shopped around already here this offseason. I think Will Dawkins is going to have to balance, how important is that, just veteran leadership and mentorship, for some of our key players, to, hey, if we can get some serious trade value back for these guys, we're probably going to have to jump at that opportunity. So we're going to monitor all those things. Remember, I'm here on Wizards Latest, dropping videos daily, so make sure you like and subscribe. Drop your thoughts in the comments down below. You can also hit me over on Twitter at Ben Robertson 32, and thanks for tuning in to Wizards Latest.